I had this growing sense of desire for something different with someone else. The chemistry was intense.
I hired the private investigator to get some answers.
I remember thinking, this is the price of infidelity. All bets are off.
He said, no one will ever know. I had betrayed my husband.
I knew then that I had to be honest when I said, I've got something to share with you.
Given the right circumstances, we do not know what we would do.
I knew that this was going to change my life. I experienced a whole array of different emotions. Everything from the excitement of a novel sexual encounter to incredible discomfort in my own skin because I knew I was doing something wrong. I did not intend to have an affair.
The first time I met Jay was at a very quaint restaurant. I was 23 and he was 34.
It was definitely love at first sight. Julie was really stunning, the former pageant queen, and she has these big, beautiful blue eyes.
He definitely surprised me because he was such a sensitive, kind, caring guy. I didn't expect that.
After Julie and I met, we were almost inseparable. It was really kind of magical in many ways.
It was pretty soon after I met Jay that I felt like he was the one that I wanted to spend my life with. As I walked down the aisle with my father, I was just excited about our life together.
And I remember feeling just blessed and fortunate. It was an extremely happy moment.
We decided to start a family and agreed that we were planning to have one child.
We were very excited about the birth of Jade. I fell in love with her instantly. Very shortly after Jade's birth, we learned that we were pregnant with our second child, Zoe.
The second baby was unexpected. We call her our unexpected blessing.
I was already beginning to feel a little bit overwhelmed with the mounting responsibilities to provide for this growing family.
I was a little bit nervous and apprehensive about telling Jay that I thought that I was pregnant again. Chandler was born on September 19th of 2003. He was our third child. It was extremely exciting, very joyful, but our family dynamic changed. We were extremely busy taking care of the children.
It was important to me that Julie could have the option to stay home and be a full-time mom. So I began to work hard in order to do that. As a therapist, I began to transition into executive coaching and consulting in the leadership development arena.
Jake was very concerned with building his private practice, and he worked all the time.
I traveled weekly, and so it took me away from Julie and the children more and more as the businesses began to grow. The impact was that the intimacy and the friendship began to deteriorate.
We had a lot of conflict around how to create time for our family and for our marriage. I definitely felt alone in my jobs and responsibilities as the mother of the children. The anger and resentment that I was harboring definitely put a further wedge between us.
I began to perceive marriage as something that had to be survived and endured. I began to distance further and withdraw more emotionally. As I traveled and as I began to work with more high-end clients, it would not be uncommon with certain clients to go to VIP strip clubs. It's not only encouraged, it's often expected around doing business deals. I was able to enter into a VIP room with high-power guys, and I could compete on that same field. So for me, it was an ego trip. I quickly began feeling alive and important.
The idea that because Jay's a therapist, he should be above any of those kinds of temptations, I think that's a mistake. I think when you're a therapist, you can be even better at justifying or rationalizing what you're doing, but nobody is above temptation.
What I tried to do was create these two worlds, where one world was my domestic family world and the other world was my business world, and that included strip clubs. I was feeling justified to do whatever I wanted to do, and that's what began to happen in my compartmentalized split life. I remember one night, one of my clients in Miami knew I was in town and invited me to a VIP club, to which I agreed to go. Shortly after we arrived, Dana walked into the room. She was very statuesque and extremely seductive, and our eyes met. She sat down at the table that I was sitting at, and then a dangerous thing happened. We began to talk. I felt a connection to her, and she reciprocated and said, "It feels like we've met before." I felt a sense of aliveness that I hadn't felt in a long time. At the end of the night, she handed me a business card. I remember thinking, I'm in trouble. The first couple of months after meeting Dana, I kept my contact with her to the club setting, maybe a couple of times a month. What I told myself at the time is that somehow we'll protect this from getting out of hand.
Suddenly, Jay seemed to be finding reasons to travel more and more to Florida, and so I wanted him to spend more time at home with us. I sometimes wondered if he was just finding something else to do. I just made a decision that I wasn't going to continue to be combative, and so I didn't say anything. I was really probably shut down.
I think his involvement with Dana, what he felt was adored, loved, the total focus of attention. I think there was a vulnerability that has been there and the need for love, and I think that all came together like the perfect storm.
I had this growing sense of desire for something different with someone else, and I began to think that that's possible with Dana. I just threw out in an email wondering if she would like to meet me and spend the weekend together, which is not something we had ever done. She very quickly responded and agreed. I flew into Miami. I knew that this was going to go someplace that I had absolutely no control over, and it would probably change my life. Despite my awareness of that, I continued to push forward. We walked upstairs into her condo, and repressed desire and need really just became unleashed in both of us, and we made love. The chemistry was intense. I experienced a whole array of different emotions. Everything from the excitement of a novel sexual encounter to incredible discomfort in my own skin because I knew I was doing something that I had no business doing, and it was wrong. The morning after we were together, I remember waking up and just thinking that the world was no longer the same. I felt intense shame and regret and remorse and anger at myself for choosing to allow my boundaries to get sloppy. And I remember thinking at that moment, this is the price of infidelity. All bets are off. Before the affair, I was judgmental of anyone who was involved in an affair. For me, that was a line that I was not going to cross. I didn't see myself as being that person that would actually go that far.
I started noticing that the business trips were expanding in the amount of time that he was gone. He would go a day sooner, or he'd spend the night and come home the next day, and I didn't really understand that.
The further Julie and I began to drift apart from one another, and the more involved I got into my separate life, the more I blamed Julie as being the cause of all of the dissatisfaction that was going on in my life.
It was increasingly difficult to reach him by phone or by text message. I knew something was going on that he didn't want me to know, and I was outraged and I was angry.
I was concerned that Julie would find out, and I was frightened by the thought of how would I deal with that. She began checking my emails, checking my phone records, and was beginning to be hyper-vigilant to any signs of the double life. And so I became a very adept liar.
Most people that have affairs would like to believe that they should keep a secret. What she doesn't know won't hurt her. I think that's really just self-justification. And I think once that began, it's like a cancer that starts metastasizing.
It became increasingly difficult to keep the two worlds apart, particularly as I wanted to make the affair world more real. I convinced myself that I was really in love with Dana and that I was really married to the wrong person and had made a mistake.
I knew without a doubt that he was up to something. I felt fairly certain that he was having an affair, and I was outraged and devastated. I hired the private investigator to get some answers for me as to what was going on. Jay did not know it, but 6 detectives followed him to Dana's condominium.
I was hungry, so we went out to dinner, and we met some of her friends there, had a lot of fun.
The private investigator confirmed to me that he was having an affair, and I was shocked that he had pulled this off for so long. I was really angry with Jay for lying to me.
At the end of the night, we went back to Dana's apartment, and I got an emergency page from Julie saying, "Call me right away." So I knew that there was some kind of a problem.
I told him that I knew where he'd been and what he'd been doing.
All hell broke loose. She had pictures of Dana and I together. It was the moment that I decided to stop lying and to tell the truth about what was going on. It started off with a lot of shame, and a lot of guilt, and a lot of remorse, and it quickly morphed into intense anger and feeling like I was being hunted like an animal.
I was angry. I was upset. I didn't know what to do. When Jay got back, we had a meeting, and he said that he was not interested in ending that relationship with her. And so I wasn't interested in being a doormat. I knew that that was not an example that I wanted to set for my children. And so I was devastated, but I did proceed with filing a divorce.
I knew my marriage was over. I felt like a failure. I felt helpless to do anything about it because I felt strongly that I needed to move in the direction that I was going.
I never stopped loving Jay. I just didn't like his choices and his actions and who he was becoming. Giving him the divorce papers was absolutely heartbreaking.
When I told the kids that I was moving out, I felt devastated.
The kids were very upset. It was very hard for them. And it was very hard for me as their mother to know that our failures at marriage were going to cause them a lot of pain. I was diagnosed with the non-Hodgkin's lymphoma, and I was very afraid. When I told Jay that I had been diagnosed, he was concerned.
My initial response was to want to run back home and be by her side and help her with the children. But she wanted me to cut off all contact with Dina. I was not willing to do that.
And so I told him no, I wasn't interested in that, because for me, he was the source of my pain and he wasn't able to be my comforter. I really didn't want him there where I felt like he was in the next room texting his girlfriend in the hospital. I was so devastated by the loss of Jay and my family that it was really unimaginable the upset that that caused for me and for my children. And so the divorce was much more difficult for me to manage than the lymphoma. I took the most aggressive treatment I possibly could to make sure that the lymphoma was gone and that it didn't come back.
The relationship with Dina began to deteriorate very quickly. She was not able to handle the demands of a real relationship, and certainly the stress of this transition that I was going through with the divorce with Julie. She really became very emotionally unstable and volatile, and I began to actually have to work harder at making that relationship work than I did my marriage, and I became very uncomfortable with that. And as a result, by early summer, that relationship ended. I felt devastated. I began to do a lot of soul searching. In spending time alone and beginning to transition out of the illusion of the affair, I began to attend personal development workshops. And as I did that, I began to wake up from the fog of this delusion that I was in.
I think in retrospect, Jay's feelings for Dana were all fantasy. In his delusion, he was thinking, I'm gonna end up with this person. As you gain experience and then wisdom, you look back and you see it differently.
I can counsel or do therapy with a couple who were having trouble in love. But what was amazing to me was how little I actually knew about love. I was a fraud, masquerading as an expert. I had to take responsibility for the immense amount of pain that I caused Julie. I realized I had really made a mistake. I was really doing some soul searching about the mistakes that I had made and began to think about my children. I had to grow up, I had to man up and take responsibility.
I had my first clean scan about 6 months after we started the treatments, and then the divorce with Jay was finalized on September the 12th. I had told the kids that we were going to go and have a trip together as a family, and I wanted them to know that life was going to continue and they were going to have happy childhoods.
So she said to me that she was going to take the children on a special vacation. I put out there, well, would you mind if I came along? She looked at me and said, why? And my response was, well, why do we have to do divorce like everybody else?
I knew if I was going to be a divorced parent, I wanted to have a relationship that was amicable with their father. I thought about it and I finally agreed.
So I joined her and the children. It was the beginning of the friendship that we had lost.
We began spending much more time together, and he spent more time with the children. I felt like the old Jay was coming back, but I didn't know if I would be able to forgive it and move forward.
I began to rediscover the parts of the relationship that I had long concluded were dead. But I didn't know if I was ever going to gain Julie's trust.
I was hesitant, but yet excited because I had begun to see some changes in Jay that I really liked.
We both recognized the need to not just put a Band-Aid over this, but in fact to deal with the impact of the affair, as well as to begin to look at how it might be possible to establish a new relationship.
We decided that we needed professional help, and we did intensive 3- and 4-day counseling sessions.
If a couple goes to therapy, one of the first things they'll do is try to repair and reestablish a trust in the relationship.
There were a lot of changes that I had to make in order to regain Julie's trust. I gave Julie access to every part of my life, including my phone records and my emails. I made a commitment to travel less and spend more quality time with the children.
Jay had to consistently show me time and time again that the changes that he had made were going to last. Eventually, we were able to come together, and that included being able to forgive the affair. And we took a leap of faith again, and he moved back into the home.
About 5-6 months into the reconciliation process, I decided I was going to propose to Julie and ask her for the privilege and the honor of being her husband again.
When we had the vow renewal, it was just the 5 of us, and it was very special, very sweet, and we were all overjoyed that we had come that far, and really, we felt like a miracle had happened. Today, our relationship is very different from what we call the first marriage. The second marriage, we have created a marriage that works for both of us. We have date nights, and we do everything we can to spend time together and time together as a family.
Every day I look at Julie and I'm amazed at this woman who, despite my failures, has chosen to give me the gift of letting me love her again. So we now have another beautiful baby girl who we get to raise in our second marriage together.
Mia was born on October 24th of 2010. She's our miracle baby.
We now live our life by a set of standards that we acquired during the painful journey of this affair and its aftermath. I keep my connections with Julie strong by putting the relationship at the center of our lives again. I feel just blessed that I was given another chance at love.
I knew that it was wrong, but I never turned around. He met me at the door. He told me that he cared about me and that it was going to be okay. So I just started getting undressed. All I could think about was Bab and my boys. I had betrayed my husband. I felt like I had betrayed my children. I wanted to just forget that it even happened. I met Bob at a high school dance. I was 14, he was 15. He had a great smile.
I looked over, and here was this very, very attractive girl that I had never seen before. So I went over to talk to her. We just spent the rest of the night just kind of lost in each other.
Bob and I dated all the way through high school and college, and we were inseparable. It was a very simple wedding. There were probably 120 people in the church.
She was just the most beautiful thing I'd ever seen. It took my breath away. When we came back from the honeymoon, we settled in our nice little apartment. I began teaching school about an hour away from our hometown.
And I worked at a big corporation. When we got married, the attractions that we felt for one another were pretty raw. We loved making love to one another. We just loved so many of the same things. We were good friends.
I don't know if I can imagine a marriage that was happier than ours.
Raising two baby boys was a challenge at times. I was a stay-at-home mom, but I loved every minute of it. During those early years, I'd met this gal named Marlene. Marlene was a very sweet, genuine person. Her husband spent a lot of time at his job, and Bob was spending a lot of time at his job.
My job was an hour away. It was a good thing, but it took time away from the family.
Bob was very much involved in the community, and he was a volunteer for the ambulance corps. So I was with the children all day, and I loved it, but I also needed a break. Marlene would walk to my house, and we would just spend the day together. She was closer to me than my own sisters.
I remember going into the house and finding out that it was Marlene. We tried to get her breathing again, and it didn't work. And I just looked up where I thought God was, and I said, why? Why did this have to happen?
It seemed like hours. Bob walked through the back door, and there was just a sadness. He said to me, "It's Marlene." He said we couldn't save her. I was devastated. In the days that followed, I tried to talk with Bob because he went on the ambulance call and he was there. And I wanted to understand what happened. He just kept saying to me, "You've got to accept this. It happened, it's awful, but there's nothing you can do about it." That answer only made me angry at him and resent him. How can you tell me to get over it?
She said, well, why don't you just talk about it? And I'd say, well, I don't want to talk about it. I just want to block it out.
During that time, we weren't communicating. If you'd asked me before any of this ever happened, if I would cheat on Bob, be unfaithful to the man I loved, I would say never, never. But given the right circumstances, we do not know what we would do. We were just two bruised people, hurting people, trying to put one foot ahead of the other.
It was a difficult thing. I didn't want to talk about it.
He was just numb. It was just very tragic.
Many women, when they feel that they are not heard or understood, or they can't go to their partner anymore for love and solace, they look for it somewhere else.
After Marlene's death, David called me. He was just a concerned friend. We were in activities together in the community that Bob and I were involved in, as was David's wife, Ann. He asked me, how was I doing? And I responded, I'm fine. He said, how can you be fine? You just lost your dear friend. When I got off the phone with David, I can't believe that he cared about how I felt and how I was coping. I thought, why can't my husband respond to me like this? I became angry, but I became hurt more than anything that he was asking me, not my husband,
A marriage is in trouble when the two people no longer really talk to each other about what's truly important, and they start to avoid each other, even though they may still live in the same house.
My resentment toward Bob was putting a big wedge between us. I felt very alone in my marriage. I was so angry with him.
I think she was disappointed in me that I couldn't respond the way she needed her husband to respond.
The phone calls were almost like a lifeline for me. I couldn't wait till Bob left for work, and I couldn't wait for David to call. It was very flattering that this man really cares about me. I found myself becoming attracted to him. I remember thinking, this can't be right. This can't be good. David's wife, Ann, was my friend. One day, David called and he said, "Why don't we just meet somewhere?" I knew I shouldn't, but I said, well, okay. That day, the children were in school. Bob was at work. So I had the whole day. And I headed out for the destination. I knew that it was wrong, and I could have turned around at any point in time, but I didn't. Just before I got to the door of the hotel, my stomach was in knots. Just talking about it today, I can feel those knots. I thought, what am I doing here? He complimented me, how good I looked, and got into bed to make love to this man. He was gentle and kind. I said to him, Bob can never find out what happened today. He said, this is between you and me. No one will ever know about this. I was feeling ashamed. I felt like I had betrayed my husband. I was so overwhelmed. When I came back home, Bob was coming through the door. I was so concerned that it would show on my face.
I trusted her completely. I was doing so many things at one time. I really didn't notice that we were getting more distant.
The days after the encounter with David, I was angry with Bob that if he had been the husband that I needed, this probably would not have happened. And I tried to justify what I had done. David would give me time to talk and listen to me. I never thought that Bob would find out. I wanted to keep it a secret till the day I died.
Kathy's affair was very common. For many women, it often starts as an emotional affair, and it can end up being a sexual affair as well.
David called me to tell me that his wife, Ann, had found out. I thought my heart was gonna pound right out of my chest. And I kept thinking, we've just been found out. And now everybody's gonna know, but most of all, Bob's going to know. My whole world was crumbling. Everything that made sense to me was not making any sense anymore. I thought Bob will just leave me. That will be the end of my marriage. I started panicking.
Most people feel guilty about having an affair because they truly believe in their marriage vows. People know that when you break the exclusivity of marriage, you break the bond. and they hate realizing how much pain they've caused the other person.
I said, there's something that I need to tell you, and you need to hear it from me.
She seemed very quiet, very troubled, and the attitude that she had that this wasn't going to be good.
I said to him, I have to confess to you that I have been having an affair, and I'm so sorry for what I've done and ashamed of myself.
I couldn't believe it. It just blew me away. I trusted her totally.
When an affair has been just revealed, they're in intense crisis. They start to wonder, who is this person that I've been with all these years? Was the love a lie? Can I ever trust him or her again? Their marriage is in total 911.
I cried, and he cried, and I asked him to forgive me. Then he said to me, I have to know who it was.
She didn't really want to tell me, but told me that it was David. I thought, my wife's got guts enough to share with me, and if I got guts enough to share with her. I had to be honest, so I said to her, I've got something to share with you. Kathy shared with me that she had been having an affair. Inside, I'm saying, you idiot, you're acting as though you haven't done anything wrong ever in the marriage. What are you going to do?
I looked at him. I knew it wasn't going to be good. My heart started pounding. I thought he's going to leave me. He goes to me, I've been unfaithful to you, Kathy, with David's wife, Ann. I couldn't believe it. We were good friends. We would see David and Ann almost on a weekly basis.
A couple of weeks before that, I ended up in the local bar, and there was Ann. We were friends, so we had drinks together. I was able to talk with Ann about my problems. As my relationship with my wife grew further and further apart, I began to feel all alone, and the desire I felt for Ann grew. Then things just evolved at that point. I knew that I had messed up terribly. To feel the guilt of what you'd done, and the next morning you got to get up and look at your wife in the face and act as though nothing happened. I didn't know what to do.
When he told me that, I was shocked. I was devastated, and my heart just sunk. And I didn't know how to deal with this. We were both just heartbroken that we had hurt one another that way.
The evening, we just spent time crying together, holding each other, vowing to make it better, that we would get through this thing. It was a wake-up call for us.
I said to Bob, we need to get some marriage counseling. And I was quite adamant about it.
I'd never been one for counseling, but at that point I realized that if our marriage was going to be whole, really whole, then I needed to get some help.
In Bob and Kathy's case, therapy is very important because they need to look at how this occurred, why this occurred, and what you can do to prevent it from happening.
When Bob and I started doing marriage counseling, I saw some real steps, giant steps that Bob was making, because I knew how hard it was for him to open up and to share his emotions.
I started, maybe for one of the first times in my life, be able to share openly with her.
We had to say some hard things to one another. I had to share some stuff with him about how he was not being the husband that he should have been.
I realized that I needed to be more of a man and stand up and say, this is what's happening and this is where I'm hurting. The rebuilding process was very slow. You're talking about changing our personality, getting me to open up.
When all is said and done, we were still that 14 and 15-year-old boy and girl that met at that dance and loved each other. We stood amongst all of our family and friends, and we renewed our vows in a way that was more meaningful and deeper and passionate than it ever was the first time. I am married to a man who has my back, that listens to me. I love him in a way that I couldn't even have imagined when I was 14 years old.
Looking at infidelity from what Kathy and I have been through and how we managed to survive it, we were just two thankful people. My number one goal in life now is loving my wife.
Infidelity has taught us that marriage is very fragile. We're so grateful that we didn't give up on each other. Love and forgiveness have to go hand in hand.